A few men rushed into the train carriage. One of them shouted at the conductor angrily, "Did you see a teenage boy? He's wearing an old coat." Klein looked at the man from the corner of his eye. The man was thin, tanned from working under the sun, and had deep-set eyes, different from most people in the Lowen Kingdom. Klein guessed he might be a Highlander or someone of mixed blood. He remembered that the Highlands were a rough and hot region at the center of the northern continent, divided among 3 countries, Fynapotter, Intis, and Lowen. The people there were once fierce warriors, but after guns became common, they could no longer fight big wars. Many left their homeland to work in big cities like Backlund, Trier, or Fynapotter City. Some worked honestly, others joined gangs and became dangerous criminals. The conductor looked scared. He pointed toward the third-class carriage. "I saw him, he went that way." The man in the black coat nodded and led his men toward the back of the train. They didn't care about the other passengers. Klein thought to himself, if I were that boy, I would have already gotten off the train by now. He continued reading his newspaper, but a minute later he felt something strange and looked up. The door opened and the teenage boy walked calmly into the carriage. He wore an old coat, a worn top hat, and carried a small bag. His face was young but serious, and his red eyes were calm and steady. Smart kid, Klein thought. He must have gotten off the train earlier and then re-entered from another carriage to throw them off. That's clever. He secretly used his spirit vision to check the boy's condition. The boy was tired and nervous, but still thinking clearly. Klein was impressed. This boy had more self-control than many grown men. Klein smiled faintly and went back to reading his paper. The boy didn't notice he was being watched, and soon went toward the third-class section again. The rest of the train ride was quiet. About 20 minutes later, Klein arrived at one of Chairwood Borough's train stations. He took a rented carriage to Minsk Street and stopped at Unit 17. He rang the doorbell. A small mechanical bird popped out and made a cuckoo sound. Klein looked at it and thought, not bad craftsmanship, though it could be better. A young maid opened the door. "May I help you, sir?" Klein smiled politely. "I'm here to see Mrs. Sammer about renting a house. I believe the place next door isn't taken yet." The maid went inside to ask her mistress, then came back and invited him in. She helped Klein take off his coat and hat. Inside, it was warm from the fireplace, and the house was big and nicely decorated. Mrs. Sammer appeared, a beautiful woman in her 30s, wearing a light yellow dress. She smiled and said, "Good evening. Would you like some tea or coffee?" "Tea, please," Klein replied. After sending the maid to make tea, she asked, "What's your name, Mr.?" Klein smiled. "Sherlock Moriarty. You can call me Sherlock." He noticed the pipes and machines in the house and commented on them. Mrs. Sammer explained that her husband designed them because he loved machinery, even though he was actually a company manager. Klein thought privately, "I didn't come here to hear about your husband's hobbies." He said politely, "I'd like to rent Unit 15. Mrs. Sammer warned him, "It doesn't have all these nice things. No fancy furniture, no silverware, no carpets." Then she talked about how her sister and brother-in-law used to live there before moving to the southern continent for business. Klein nodded, thinking, "That's not really my concern, madam." They began discussing rent. Mrs. Sammer said, "It's 18 soldi per week plus 1 for the furniture. I'll need a £50 deposit." Klein shook his head. "I can only pay half a year's rent up front, £25 total. I'm new to Backlund and I can't afford to tie up too much money." After a short negotiation, Mrs. Sammer agreed. She asked if Klein had any identification. He lied smoothly. "I was in such a rush to leave home that I forgot my papers. I'm from Mid-Seashire." Just then, the maid returned with tea. It smelled nice and tasted far better than what Klein usually drank. "Excellent tea," he said sincerely. They finished signing the rental contract, and Klein handed her £25. Mrs. Sammer smiled and said, "Mr. Moriarty, if you're looking for a job, remember, living in this area costs at least £2.05 soldi a week. If you make less than £3, life will be difficult." She then started talking about how much money one needed to hire servants, cooks, and maids. Klein kept smiling politely while thinking, "You're just showing off now." At that moment, the door opened and her husband came in. He was stout, wore a black suit, and had neat mustaches. He greeted Klein warmly and even invited him to dinner, but Klein declined politely. After that, the maid showed Klein next door to Unit 15, his new home. The place was spacious but empty. The maid told him Mrs. Sammer didn't want the house to be noisy or crowded, then left to fetch clean sheets. Finally alone, Klein sat down in the quiet house. For the first time since arriving in Bachland, he felt a wave of loneliness. But he quickly forced himself to focus. He needed a plan for his future. He thought about his options for work, becoming a writer, but that would make him too famous and he couldn't risk exposure. Becoming a reporter. But that required official documents he didn't have. Becoming a private detective, perfect. It offered freedom, good pay, and gave him a reason to investigate things. That's why he had chosen the name Sherlock Moriarty.